in the People Daily today. We need more coins to reach up there, and that is ugali and sugar. And I want, in a moment, also our panelists to weigh in on this, the food crisis we're having in the country. And I read also your opinion yesterday in the Standard regarding this particular situation. Who is telling the truth when it comes to the crisis that we are in right now when it comes to food security?
Thank you very much, Dibal. Would you allow me to perhaps just conclude on the topic?
Yeah, just briefly, we'll go there. This is just a cursory look. You don't need to belabor the points. You say, is the state sincere in its attempt to ease cost of living? Do you think it is sincere?
It's very sincere, because when you have a problem and you're seeking a solution, you look at the steps that have been taken. I think it is important for all who are critiquing the situation to do so objectively, but not to lose sight of the fact that we have a problem and that problem needs a solution. Who is going to provide the solution?
All right.
Definitely the government. And the government is doing that. Would we be happy or not happy? The option is only to critique. The opposition, for instance, should critique, can question what is happening, can question the processes. That's the legitimate responsibility of any opposition or other stakeholders.
Yes.
But as to the responsibility of the government to do so, it is constitutionally obliged to do what it is doing. The provision of food is a constitutional obligation as part of the basic needs, as basic rights. And so let's be happy when a step is taken to end the suffering of the mwanainchi. Otherwise, it appears like some people are unhappy that the government is intervening to aid the hunger.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we must always ask ourselves, how did we get there?
Right.
And that's critical. It's part and parcel of having a very bad food security policy and program in place. It's a result of not having looked at market forces and really emphasized them. It's an effect of not having dealt with the drought. It's an effect of not having dealt with the 3 million bags that we get and we don't conjure and put it together. It's a result of not addressing, when we have rains, how to deal with water storage. And these fall in various dockets that are manned by the CSs that belong to Jubilee government. So when we're talking about a crisis has happened. But so many countries that don't even have food, enough food, countries that are food insecure, to some extent, are able to supply enough for themselves. And Dibal, just let me dwell on one thing which is very critical, and that is the Security Food Bill 2014 that is currently now in the Senate, and I think it went to the National Assembly, where National Assembly brought the issue of money bill again. But this is where these issues should have been addressed, because it put an authority and structures at the national and the county. We'll
drill deeper into this much later. Let's complete the NASA debate. But just to get your cursory look on that particular editorial cartoon, what do you think about it? Honorable Kirwa, very briefly.
About the cost of living? Well, you cannot say it without going to the background of the problem. When you tell us that it is because of depressed harvest this year or last year, it is not entirely true. You don't harvest wheat here. We import a lot of wheat. In fact, 3/4 of it. Number two, at times, people in high position should not be lying. The Deputy President, I saw him this morning, saying that the highest yield of maize was 42 million bags in 2015. Nothing can be further from the truth. The highest maize was harvested during the Kibaki 1 in 2006, 2007. But let's assume there was maize. What did they do as government? They are supposed to have stored 8 million bags of maize. They are supposed to take care of post-harvest losses that arise out of that. So these are some of the things that we must fundamentally interrogate. And we are not saying that we are happy Kenyans are suffering.
Fantastic. And
far from the truth.
Interrogating we will do in a moment. Tia, very briefly.
I think the issue of cost of living is not something new. I think it has happened across the country and also across the world. For this particular issue in Kenya, I think we have the issue of climatic change, we have the issue of drought, it's things that sometimes we don't foresee. most of the time we need to look at the issue of disaster risk reduction and management. And I think I'm the person who is pushing the issue of disaster risk management bill in Parliament. And we are, as we continue, we keep on putting things together so that we can move forward. So this is not the first time that we've had cost of living going up. And I think this should not be blown out of proportion. The government is doing all it can so that at least this issue is sorted. And I think making this as a political agenda is I think, it's laughing at Kenyans. And it's not good. I think we need to look, if there's issues, then we need to look at it together. Because unga or no unga, I think what we are looking at, especially for the pastoralists, is the issue of prolonged drought. And people are being fed. Food is getting to the community from government. And I would say that if, for example, we do not get food from government to the pastoralist communities, the animals and all the, population would have been dead.
Thank you. Dr.Shem.
It's hard to defend failure of the concerned officers to ensure we don't get into this crisis. There are many reasons we could give, but that's why we have leadership. We've seen other countries much worse off than us, but they don't have food security problems. So, but it's only in our country where people do things wrong. We've seen problems in the Ministry of Health, but people get away with them. Surely the minister, the CS for Health, should have long gone home by now. And the Agriculture Minister should also give answers. But having said that, I think also as a nation, we must recognize that when there is a problem, and of this scale, it's no time to grandstand and point fingers. This is the time that leadership and statesmanship says, why don't we sit together as Kenyans? Let's forget NASA, let's forget Jubilee, and let's forget Third Force, and even Fagilia Yote. Let's come together. Can't we get a solution to get over this? We should even suspend the campaigns we're having around the country. We should basically be addressing this key need. But you know, the leaders we have are only concerned about either preserving or getting power.
All right, let's go back to the issue of NASA. And before you took a short break, of course, you had something on your tongue to tell us this morning. I hope you've not lost track of your thoughts.
Yes, I haven't. Dibal, why did we seek a new constitution? Is to have a renewal, a national rebirth, to create institutions that will anchor the rule of law and governance. If now we are saying that we are anticipating that the court will make a decision that we don't like, what you are trying to tell the world is that decisions of the court must be favorable to you for them to be acceptable. I think the declaration by NASA yesterday was very irresponsible. It's actually a recipe for chaos. Because when you are saying that the NASA presidential candidate made a statement that if the courts don't rule in favor of NASA, Kenya will not go to elections. What essentially is he saying? He's saying that there will be chaos. Yet, the settlement of all disputes in the Republic of Kenya is a prerogative of the judiciary, the courts. When a day before, the NASA presidential candidate on Saturday said that the declarations at Afara Stadium will be a game changer. What was a game changer? Two issues. Of course, there was the clarion call on UNGA. So, like dR.Shem also is saying, we are trying to grandstand. You know, we are now trying to make the UNGA, because Kenyans are hungry, because majority of Kenyans have no access to basic needs because of the skyrocketing cost of living. We are saying that we'll make UNGA revolution a NASA revolution. So they are taking advantage of the hunger among Kenyans to not only disparage their competitors, that's the executive, the government in power, Jubilee, but to also laugh. I looked at the NASA presidential candidate yesterday on TV when he was talking about UNGA. You could not see any kind of pain. You know, it's like fun. It's like, you know, now we have a problem of ugali, so we are eating this. You know, then I saw another principal in NASA saying, you know, we only want some UNGA to drink porridge. You know, you are kind of making satire, making fun. Number 3, is that when we continue criticizing and delegitimizing IBC, we called for IBC reforms, we did. We ourselves across board in the Senate and the National Assembly did support the reforms in IBC. It happened. And now we have an IBC that is new, completely new. And the law that has been passed is passed by the legitimate organ of the Constitution, that the National Parliament. So when we start, what should we be focusing on? For instance, I think that we in Jubilee, and we in NASA, and we who are the independents, and we who are in the other many parties, because there are many other players, yes, in apart from Jubilee and NASA, should be looking at other very important issues, for instance, on integrity. We have an interagency committee. You know, IBC is there, DPP is there, EACC is there, to look at the integrity of the electoral process, including individuals who may have questionable reputations or individuals who have misconducted themselves. We should be interrogating the integrity of the electoral process. So this is not about just NASA and Jubilee, it's about Kenya. And therefore, what I would say finally is that when you say that if the courts make this decision, there will not be elections in Kenya. And we know the Constitution of Kenya clearly stipulates that at the specific date of the second Tuesday of the 5th year, and that is now 8th of August 2017, there shall be an election. Our competitor is saying there shall not be an election. So what's the option of not having an election in Kenya? You are saying you want to create a civilian coup. So it appears like some people are very desperate. They are sensing defeat. They are now, you know, looking for a route to escape from the actual elections. Let me say, elections in Kenya will happen. And they will happen not because NASA has said they will happen. Elections will happen not because Jubilee has said they will happen. They will happen because they must happen. And some people must win, others must lose.
Dibal, it's always very important to put things into the context. And the basis of this is a judiciary judgment that was already put into place on the 7th. That was very, very clear. And the problem is when we speak like the way Mheshimiwa Kabando is speaking, we're speaking like as though we are in an utopia where we don't know how systems work. We know very well that there are situations where cases have been made and judgments have been made, and people feel that the judges were compelled using other means to make those specific judgments. So it's not like as though we have systems that are 100% open and transparent that Kenyans have confidence with. We are hinging this on a constitutional dispensation and clarity that talks about the importance of transparency. And the reason for emphasizing that that transparency has to take place at the level of the constituency is that there'll be no sense in anybody's mind or in the Kenyan's mind that there was a change that has taken place from the polling station to the constituency and to the national. Because this is what is very, very critical. Kenyans need to be able to feel that I cast my vote, that this process has been fair. We're looking at the process of ensuring that there's a fair process put into place. On the UNGA issues, you know, it's very, very important to contextualize that we are at a point where we're looking at the promises that were made, promises that were not kept, and promises that please still bind Kenyans. People are looking at the promises that were made on the double digits, for example, on food security, for example. This is the basis of what we are saying as NASA we're going to do. If you're looking at our 6th pillar for social and economic development, is to ensure that institutions never find themselves in this situation where we're actually starving and where we're going hungry. If you're looking at all the other pillars, reconciliation, looking at matters of injustice through the TGRC process, looking at the issue of devolution, looking at the issue of ensuring that institutions work, looking at the issue of addressing poverty. We're talking about a comprehensive system in NASA that will actually be able to look at this and put things into context. And this is what we're talking about. These are the pillars we're talking about. I don't think anybody is smarting from this situation. In fact, the cases that we're making is that after 4 years, if this is the situation we're in, we definitely need to change and choose our leaders wisely so that we don't find ourselves in this situation. And I think that is the basis of the argument that is being put across. And of course, We sympathize. But what we're saying is that we should not find ourselves in this situation. We should not find ourselves in a situation where we are saying that we have given relief food, for example, in drought areas and nobody has died, when we have actually seen pictures of people dying. You know, when you take up mantle of responsibility and governance, it's not about you and what you get out of it. It's about what you give back to the people. And what Kenyans are saying now is that things have actually spiraled completely out of control. And this is happening at a time when we're talking about the need to be able to change. And Dibal, we have capacities in this country. We have professionals in this country. I always quote the case of Singapore, that in 1963 was exactly in our situation. It is easy to change. Systems of corruption need to be addressed. And as much as Mheshimiwa Kabanda is saying, oh, we should be able to discuss, we should be able to talk, this is exactly what we've always been saying. Let us talk. How many times was called An-Nasa really saying, let's talk about food security, let's talk about changes that we can make to make this country a better country? Who refused those overtures? It was Jubilee itself that refused those particular initiatives that were made. So I think it is wrong and presumptuous and preposterous to make it look like, oh, things just happened overnight. They did not. They happened because somebody somewhere did not do what they were expected to do, and the consequences are too big. And we're saying now, we're moving to another 5 years, and we need to think seriously about not having this situation change, and that calls for a leadership change in this country, so that we have changes. And I've seen also the other argument that people put, but these are the same old leaders. None of these principles has been a president before, because at the end of the day, even the leaders who are currently there were part of those regimes in the past, and therefore they are to be blamed for them or to be praised for them in equal measure.
Right, maybe the question we need to ask ourselves, even as we're facing this crisis of the milk as well, we had around 300 million shillings that the government purchased during the glut in April last year and processed into powder, which remains a mystery because we've not really heard about this particular milk that was stored in the strategic reserve being released to the public. But all we just know is that we're importing 300 tons of...
There's a point that I think we should also focus on, because we seem to be blame shifting one way. Do we remember that we have a new dispensation and that we have a two-tier system? We have a devolved system. Who is responsible for agri-business? Who is responsible for food security in the counties? The fact is, the county governments are in charge of agriculture. And as much as they are still...
So don't you think there will be shuffling blame? But we cannot talk collectively.
I want to look at it wholly. I'm not blaming. I'm not blaming either side. I'm only looking at the institutional
perspective,
aspect. That we should also be asking, what have our counties done with the monies allocated them in the last 4 financial years as government responsible for agriculture to initiate and expand irrigation, initiate and grow agribusiness, start enterprises at the county level. So I think when you're interrogating food security in this country, we should look at the total sum.
Okay. Let's hear from Honorable. We'll come to you. Let's hear from Honorable Kirwa.
Give us an opportunity to also say something.
Please, Honorable Kirwa.
Just one liner.
Well, at times I think we discuss issues as if we don't live in Kenya. One, the policy, as far as I know, it still remains with the government of the day, and that's the national government, as far as food security is concerned. That's why when it comes to interventions like the one the government is taking, they are taking at the national level. What they devolved are just a simple functions at the county level for various departments of agriculture to operate. But even that devolution was not properly anchored on the policy framework from the national government. Now, number two, the bar last year, and I'm a farmer, and I plant maize. Last year, we were given fertilizer by the same farm that is importing maize, which was ostensibly DAP, but it was 1770 NPK, which is meant for tea, not for maize. And many farmers, both in Uasin Gishu and Trans Nzoia, do know that the maize at a certain stage withered because they did not have the basic ingredients that is supposed to support growth. And when you look at it, with this now importation by the same farm, it seems it was sort of preordained to a food shortage. So when we talk of lack of effective harvest because of the rain. It is not entirely true. It is because of poor fertilizer. Number two, when you talk of there's been maize from 2015, what happened with the strategic grain reserve? How much did they have at the beginning of this year? Less than 2 million bags. How much are they supposed to have? 8 million bags of maize. Now, whatever you are importing, if you have anything in strategic grain reserve, you need not to have imported even a single grain of maize.
Yes.
How much is it going to cost us by the time it lands in Kenya? Almost 6 million. When you are transporting maize on Tazara rail from Zambia to the port of Dar-Shem, it is almost like the cost of maize bought in Kitale. So what you are telling us is you are bringing maize from other farmers to come and depress our own maize when you should have bought from our farmers. How much did the government offer in November last year to farmers in Trans Nzoia and Uasin Gishu? 2,300 per bag. How much did they end up eventually paying? They ought to have paid 3,000.
Yes.
But it had to take farmers going on the streets for the government to raise that. What did they do again? They brought other stringent measures which have never been there since independence, of issues of the breakage, the discolored. We knew the parameters were clear. You were supposed to have 14% moisture content. They lowered to 13. These are parameters they were doing to frustrate the process of purchase of maize. Now, what happened to our maize? Some of it went to South Sudan, some of it went to Uganda. What happened nationally? There was a crisis of maize shortage. But when you look at this issue of food, it's not about maize alone. It's about other foods. What has happened in Kenya? There has been inflation, which is likely to head for recession. Why? We've been borrowing every year almost a trillion shillings from internal and external sources. When Kibaki left this country, it was at 800 billion. How much is it today? 3.8 trillion. What has happened? Overborrowing. What is happening? Inflation. What does inflation mean? The cost of purchasing food goes up because people don't have the capacity to purchase. So when we talk about these things, it's not about Jubilee or NASA. It is about the reality in Kenya today. What needs to be done? Import the maize, but you must cushion the shilling. You must look for ways of intervening to make sure that Kenyans can purchase this food. You can bring the maize. You cannot feed everybody. Other people will have to buy food.
All right. Don't you find it a bit concernating that also in 2012, just a year to election, in what most economists have blamed also on the 2011 drought, still we have the same cycle that we were blaming drought even in 2017. Are we not learning? Are we none the wiser when it comes to this cyclical sort of plight that we have as a country when it comes to, because we cannot predicate all these things to drought.
Yeah.
We have countries where they don't even see any gray and overcast sky. They don't have any rainfall, but they are food secure. Tia?
Thank you. First, maybe I would want to respond to some of the things that my sister Zani said on the issue of integrity, transparency, on issues. I think these are all two ways. As much as we're talking about transparency and accountability and integrity on government, we should also talk about opposition, ODM. And I think it's been all over the papers last week that even small things like, for example, party slots in terms of giving to issue of IALA, there was big issue in NASA, ODM, WIPA. And I think these issues are all over the place. So people should not look at themselves as if they are very clean and they're looking at bad government, bad people, when they themselves are not even in government in the first place, and they can do things that Kenyans will not even believe their eyes. People are giving to their brothers, their sons, their cousins, and all that kind of stuff. And it's glaring issues in Kenya, and I think this is what is not even going to help Kenyans at all. Number two, I would also want to say the issue of, for example, election. Warning to Electoral Commission, this is not the first time. Warning has happened. Every time election year, I think ODM is out there warning Electoral Commission. And elections happen. And one thing I would also want to tell Kenyans and the rest of my panelists here is that we have 18 presidential candidates. ODM is just one of them. If one thinks that, for example, going into it, they're going to lose as they've lost before, because that's not the first time. Raila has lost first time, second round, third round. And he's going to lose it again, because if things are happening the way they're happening, if small things are given to them and they're not even sharing out to Kenyans. I come from northern Kenya. I come from Isiolo. And I've never seen any slot that goes there. I know they are given positions, they're given slots so that they can share out to Kenyans. Are they doing that? Are they appealing to them? What will they have reason? Will they have to give, for example, votes? So I think we better now go into election. I think the stage is already set. There are candidates who are already prepared. If 1 out of 17 is not ready, for example, and there's maybe keep on talking about a system that is not working, they're looking back into constitution that we did, and they're looking at changing, calling for referendum even to have ministers, which is not even in the constitution. The constitution, in the first place, basically we are supposed to have ministers outside, and I think that's what had happened even this when the Uhuru came into power. So if, for example, they want to change, they want to call for referendum immediately after election, then again, what will happen? How long does it take for us to be able to do that? Do we have the money? So basically, they are not looking at winning strategy, appealing to communities that they've not done that before. By, for example, even doing small things, like, for example, even talking about drought. I know it's the government is supposed to provide, for example, support to issues of drought.
But drought should not be even a point of discussion on this point.
Yes,
yeah,
but because of food issue. Like, for example, I might not talk about ugali in Isiolo and Marsabit, northern Kenya, because that's not our staple food.
Thank you.
But that is an issue for the rest of Kenyans.
Thank you.
So we also feel with them.
Thank you. Dr.Shem.
I feel a bit agitated when we try to cast aspersions and take issues with IBC for threatening to go to court. As a matter of fact, for me, NASA saying threatening to not participate, I don't know whether it was not to have elections or
to boycott.
To boycott,
yeah.
Boycotting and stopping elections are two different things. But whichever they said, it borders on incitement, because you're basically saying we want an extrajudicial means.
Yeah.
That's what we need to look at. Let me advise NASA for free. Either prepare for, if they feel that, and for my sister, whom I have a lot of respect for, Senator Zani, to cast aspersions on courts. I think we are being very unfair to the judiciary, that we know our courts are compromised. How do we know they didn't compromise the High Court that ruled this way? I mean, if that's the case. So I don't think it's in fairness, without having any evidence, to cast aspersions on courts. But that be as it may, I would have been very happy if NASA said, look, should the High Court the Appeal Court rule in favor of IBC, as NASA, we'll go to the Supreme Court. We'll go all the way to the full hog. But whatever the courts at the highest level decides, that's what we go by. Because when we start doubting our institutions, particularly the judiciary, we are setting a very dangerous precedence. Having said that, Debal, I'm also surprised and concerned that when we are talking about free and fair elections, and here let me talk as diaspora, and the diaspora have beef with NASA especially, that NASA is the only institution, despite my sister, the Secretary General of ODM, who was very pro-diaspora voting, NASA is the only coalition that came out publicly to say we are opposed to diaspora being registered to vote. We don't know Jubilee stand because they have not pronounced it publicly. I mean, how is it on one hand you're saying you want free elections, free and fair democratic elections? On the other hand, you are the same ones who are saying let's block diaspora. And even
but
the current
there was
problem,
this moment, there was some suspicion also with NASA on how the diaspora voting was being done.
Yes,
right?
but those
because
fears,
there was no clarity on why.
But it's
also some of the envoys were.
It's the constitutional right. They
Just
also
a
have the right to do that.
with due respect.
Just a moment. There was no clarity totally on how the registration was being carried out, and even some of the envoys were being embroiled, with the voter registration.
No.
Don't you stand with that fact? That's just
yes. If I can clarify,
yes,
there are obviously our issues. One point at a previous session we said, yeah, look, we are fearing that elections even in Kenya will be rigged. Why don't we stop those if the fear for rigging is the reason we are stopping diaspora? But I think that's a different debate. This morning I was trying to send fees to my daughter, pocket money in the UK. I was surprised to be told that the pound to the Kenya shilling is now 135 Just last week, 2 weeks ago, it was about 120 shillings. We are forgetting the diaspora, even though that itself is a crisis. How are we moving within a span of just 2 weeks from 120 to 135? It means that's another side we are not looking at. But even that said, who are the people who are helping stabilize our money? It's this very diaspora that we are locking out. But if I allow me also to talk just a bit about food security, again, I think ODM should be the last to talk about maize crisis, because then they open old wounds. We know what has happened in the past. But that is not an excuse that we should not deal with the current crisis. If the problem is corruption, although I don't have evidence that there's the problem of corruption in this maize crisis, there could be. Why don't we just isolate that issue and deal with the issue of corruption rather than politicizing?
Thank you.
But yes, please, for me, I normally say, Jubilee is the problem because they're in power, they need to address this issue. But NASA is not the solution.
All right, thank you. All right, we have also your tweets which are rushing in, and we have Usha Jose Kendathil standing by to let us know what you're saying.
Right, got a lot of feedback coming. It seems this is a topic a lot of you are interested in, so we'll just get straight to it. On our question, we were asking, do you think NASA's threat to boycott general elections of a presidential announcement court ruling will hold? And we have a raft of comments. We have Simon who says the other 9 presidential contestants are willing to participate. Only one NASA may opt to bolt out. We have John Kiricho who says it's a manifestation of brain rupture, no agenda at all. They sense defeat. The government has done in all sectors what ought to be done, so they don't have any place to botch the government. We have Castro who says, I support NASA 110%. Those returning officers in each of this constituency are appointees of the IEBC. Why would the same IEBC deny them that mandate of announcing presidential results? I can smell something fishy. We also have Evans who says, why not? It beats logic when people who shout 70% panic when they see 70% plus 1, panic when they see their appointees at the IEBC are barred by law to doctor results in their favor. We have finally Minei who says, ilivyo kawaida dua la kuku halimpati mwewe, hivi karibuni hawa wanafiki wa Pentagon wataambulia pasipo. Moving on to Twitter, we have Kipleting Manuela who says, you cannot be a player and a referee at the same time. NASA should stop being selfish. We also have Patrick who says, why does the IEBC want to appeal the decision of the High Court instead of strengthening its structures to cope with that ruling? We have Jacob who says, of the same opinion as Ochuo, though, both sides of the divide have a chance to push a dice. We have Friday who says, kura yangu sauti yangu. In Kenya, it's not who you vote for that counts, it's who counts the votes. Interesting perspective. We also have Deep Upkeep who says, what's the point of a boycott? It's giving the current incumbent a free one-way ticket to presidency. We have Jubilee Party, at Jubilee Party, Mavic, who says boycotting is just a threat. I think they want 10 million strong votes to be announced from their side. And finally, we have Peter who says, unless this matter is addressed well, it could cause chaos. IEBC and court shouldn't forget that NASA is a major shareholder here. Right, so moving on, remember, do keep the comments going, and we'll continue this conversation online, #AMLiveNTV, that's where you get us. On to our video of the day, which might have done better to be placed at the beginning of the discussion. We've talked a lot about the cost of living, so here's a summary of what government and opposition had to say.
Uchumi imeoza, imeporomoka. Bei ya unga staple food imepanda kwa sababu ya usimamizi mbaya. Kwanza kwa upande ya production hawakufanya mpango sawa sawa.
Yes, we have a shortage. Na ni kwa sababu tulikuwa na kiangazi, hamukuvuna miwa ya kutosha, tukawa na kiangazi, hatukuvuna mahindi ya kutosha, lakini importation tutafanya kiasi kidogo ya hii temporary shortage ya mahindi na miwa, lakini ndani ya miezi mitatu hii mambo yote ya shortage itakuwa imeisha.
Hao jamaa wanalala mpaka saa ile imekwisha ndio wanaamka. Mahindi hakuna, tunaenda Mexico. Mahindi hakuna.
Wale ambao wanatuambia saa hii wanatusomea mambo marefu walikuwa uongozini wakati huo, and they did what we are doing now.
Remember, #AMLiveNTV is how you can keep this conversation going. Give us your views and comments. Back to you, Tipa.
All right, we can see a shuffling of blame there. We can see both also the Deputy President and the Right Honorable were also then in government, and also the issue of maize scandal was key during their regime as well. Well, we want to continue the discussion here with our panelists as we also are wrapping up, just to get the headline thoughts on this and which way to go. Food security is a key topic that we cannot really afford to have enough time sometimes to really exhaust that particular subject. But let's just hear from you, Honorable Kabando, as we're winding up. 5.2 million liters, I think, billion liters of milk is what Kenya produces, leading in Africa. And yet we can go to the shops right now and buy this particular packet of milk very expensively. Why all this, you know, it flies in the face on maybe Kenyans are really wondering why we have this capacity to produce enough milk, and yet Kenyans cannot really buy that packet of milk cheaply.
You know, I admire the sobriety of my old friend, comrade,
Very briefly, sir.
Dr.Shem that we should focus on individuals who have been who are responsible for the respective dockets. I think we are hearing so much of politics about this national disaster, because it's a disaster. But you know, food and you know, prices of basic commodities, and now the exchange rates with the foreign currency. The individual in charge of agriculture at the national level, because I want to focus on two. Because yeah, you know, we did
very briefly.
Yeah, the individual responsible for agriculture should be the one who is speaking more authoritatively with scientific evidence, not the media analysts, not the political posturings in Larry's. So the cabinet secretary in charge of agriculture is one we should be hearing on a radio, watching on TV, reading his commentaries in the newspapers. I think we need to accept that something wrong has happened as we are transiting to the new dispensation. That individuals have just been given jobs and they are quiet. I saw yesterday a committee of which I'm a member, you know, in the members committee of agriculture and national assembly, trying to interrogate the matters of the imported maize and so on and so forth, and even you know, causing blame to the cabinet secretary. I am saying that, and this has been said before, that the cabinet secretaries of today must be seized of their responsibilities. We should be hearing the national official, and at the other level, and we should not leave this unsaid. The counties are also responsible. We are giving county governments money to do agriculture. And we cannot say that this is an exclusive responsibility of the national government.
Thank you. Let's leave it as that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
For instance, you know, COD controls 24 counties. The NASA principles, led by the ODM leader, because it's more about ODM, not even about NASA, should be telling us what are the counties that are controlled by ODM, 24 of them.
Thank you.
And the affiliates. What are they doing about food security?
Thank you. Let's hear from Dr. Zani.
Yeah, thank you. I think as we wrap up, first, we are really emphasizing on a fair process. And I go back to this same Article 86, which is very clear, accountable and transparent. And what we are emphasizing on is putting systems that are going to, I think we have had regimes, for example, where transparency hasn't been 100%. We've just seen the French presidential race concluded very, very amicably. Because you've had transparent systems, we haven't here. Because if you have a transparent system, issues will not come up. And that's what we're fighting for. And I think if we put this law as it has been judged by the April judgment, then we're going to have even the confidence of Kenya, and that issue of transparency will not be there. Then on the issue of the counties, you know, it's a Jubilee rhetoric again, like many of the other rhetorics, like, you know, you've sensed defeat. If there's somebody who has sensed defeat, it is definitely not NASA, it is Jubilee that has sensed defeat. Because one of the rhetorics, again, that we are having, that what has happened to the county governments, surely, on the basis of 15% that has been given to them, when we know in the counties we've had the problem of recurrent budget,
Right.
we've had the problem of people who have inherited such a big workforce, we have a problem of 85% that is not being discussed. So I think we're not being sincere. And also we're not being sincere when we discuss and have that discourse as a discourse only for COD counties or NASA counties for that matter. It should cut across the board. On the issue of my sister, I think she's aware that the person she's referring to who was meant to be on the EALA list is not on the EALA list. So I think she's talking from probably a further historical period. But I think really as a wind-up, I think it's very, very important that we do not forget that we live and contextualize issues. And what Obotho is saying, according to him, what I'm alluding about the judiciary, unless he does not remember the case of the judge that was very, very clear and was played out about the claims that were being made. This was in the public, and I think he read the newspaper.
Thank you. Honorable Kirwa, very briefly.
Well, mine is about food security. I think I'll spend a bit of time there. One, I remember we gave the Ministry of Irrigation for Galana Gulalu 14 billion, and we expected 10 million bags of maize. And that would have been able to bridge this gap. That maize we've not seen. Number two, it is not entirely true that it is everything about drought. Farmers in sugarcane producing areas, their farmers' arrears arising out of planting cane, harvesting, and them not being paid.
Thank you.
These are facts, and facts must be facts.
Right. Tia,
Finally,
yes.
70% of the money that is given to counties goes for salaries and recurrent, only leaving 30% for development.
Thank you.
And this is the challenge that we have.
Right, let's hear from Tia.
Thank you. On the issue of Jubilee sensing defeat, we've never been defeated. I think we've always had our system put in place, and we are set to win.
Okay.
Two, I would also want to talk about believing in our institution. Believing in our institutions. Believing in our institution. I think judiciary is one of them. IBC is one of them. And if we don't believe in our institution, then I think we should not have them.
Thank you. Dr.
Lastly, I would also want to talk about food security.
Very
food security, yes. Food security is very sensitive.
We're headlining thoughts.
Something on life, death. So I think we need to have this CS on agriculture, really articulating issues and assuring Kenyans that things are okay.
Thank you.
The electoral reforms, the issue of tallying at the constituency level, I think it's true, as somebody, a tweet did say, we need to address it. But what we need to do, as my sister was talking about transparency and accountability, that also appears in Article 10, our national values. But that goes beyond what they are requiring. I think what we should look for is, do we need an electoral reform to clarify under what circumstance can it be altered, an announcement from the county or from the constituency, because that may be necessary. Finally, in the case of food security, and by way of declaring interest, the Ministry of Agriculture have for the first time recognized diaspora. We're part of AGCK, the Agricultural Council of Kenya. I do know that this past week they were working on strategy, national agricultural strategy. Hopefully that, if implemented, will make sure that we don't see similar problems recurring in future. But finally, one point just on yellow maize. On our diaspora forum, there's been quite in the past few days talk about yellow maize. Kenyans have been given this, I think it was propaganda in the 84s, that yellow maize is for fodder. Our colleagues in the US are saying, but even now, that's what I go and buy. And even some Kenyans are saying the sweetest maize they ever ate was yellow. I think it's vital we separate propaganda from this so that we don't deny Kenyans food just for political reasons.
Dr.Shem Ochodo, Global Leader, Kenya Diaspora Alliance, thank you for coming through this morning. Also, Tia Galgalo, Women Rep, Isolo County. Honorable Kipruto Rap Kirwa, Deputy Leader, ANC. Also, Dr. Agnes Zani, General Secretary General of ODM, and Kabando Akabando Mukureni, Member of Parliament. Thank you for your input this morning. Of course, we know time is not really on our side. We should be exhaustively discussing this, but I want to thank you as well for your valuable company and your tweets. Also, we could not be able to take calls this morning because of time, but this shall continue. Let's see how it pans out this week, especially with the food security. As Galgalo was saying, we need also to interrogate the Minister of Agriculture. Also, Kabando Kubando was weighing in on that as well. Thank you for your valuable company. My name is Dbalanya.